Hello everyone, welcome to this special Andor Spoilercast episode. It's been a while since we did one of these, but I think we also feel so enthusiastically about the show that we had to jump on the mic and break down the second season of Andor. So I thought to start we could maybe quickly just talk about season one, which a lot of it we watched together. Maybe just some quick thoughts on the show, then we'll jump straight into season two.
My experience of the first season was watching it with you guys, and I'm really glad that I did, because I think, Harry, you'd mentioned to me a few times that this wasn't just your typical average Star Wars content, that there was something kind of special about this show. And I was a bit skeptical at first, but when we actually did sit down and watch it together, I did really feel after a few episodes that that I'd stumbled on something that actually was really, really great Star Wars content. And it wasn't until those few episodes, I think it's the second arc of the first season, where I just really got sold on the concept of it as a show completely. I just really liked the story, the heist element, the way that it was seemingly really effective at creating characters and developing them and getting you to care about them, and then also disposing of them when needed, and all of that coming together was pretty awesome for me. And then the rest of the season just kind of carried on going from there. So yeah, I was very much a big fan of it.
I wouldn't just say it's fantastic Star Wars content. I'd say it's just great television, full stop. The way I kind of got into Andor. Obviously, big Star Wars fan. The Disney stuff can be kind of hit or miss. Although I think I kind of like most of it. Even if some of it is way better than the kind of other things they've done. And initially I was kind of reluctant on this. I wasn't entirely sold. I should have been, because Tony Gilroy comes with a pretty great track record, and then there's people like Bo William, who worked on House of Cards as part of the writing staff as well. But I think I sort of watched the first one, waited, and then I think it was kind of the prison arc was airing weekly, and people were talking about how great the show was, you have to be watching this, and then I kind of caught up to watch the last few kind of as they aired weekly. And yeah, hugely impressed by the quality of the writing, how human all the characters felt, some of the performances. I think especially those two middle arcs of season one, as you said, the heist, and then the Narkina 5 prison stuff. How politically charged it was, how you can take it out of Star Wars and it still kind of works really well, but also that it's almost not shy about being Star Wars. And the fact that it's almost it's a prequel to a prequel, which is this kind of absurd idea, but how much pathos that gives it, that you kind of where this guy's going to end up.
I remember when just first seeing it announced of they're making a season about that guy from Rogue One, or it's just what are they doing? This is ludicrous, milking everything that can be milked. This is it. This is the line I draw. I'm not watching this. I've done too much. I've been burned too many times. And then it was after you, Andrew, saying how actually no, it's pretty good. You should watch this. I think you could have only have been I think possibly it was the first 4 episodes are out, or something like that.
Well, I watched the first 3 episodes, I think, in basically a row because they came out together, and I remember thinking the first episode was this is good. It's feeling a little slow paced, but it's really good. And then second episode, it continues to build up, and then third episode, and it sort of suddenly kicks off, and I was like, no, this is good. I feel like I would have been telling you it was good after I'd watched it. Definitely by Oldani, by the 4th episode, it's clear. It was clear to me that it was truly exceptional. So I would definitely have been pushing you to watch it after that.
Yeah, because I think I got into it sort of as it was coming out, but definitely missed the drop of the first 3 episodes, which all came together. I didn't watch through any of those. I feel it was probably around when either the 4th or 5th episode came out that you finally got me to start watching through them. Then I remember just having to wait a week between each episode,
Yeah.
which was such a brilliant return to how television used to be, where you're just sort of there thinking like, God, what's going to happen next week?
The bit in I can't remember the name of the episode, but the one in the Narkina 5 arc where it ends with Kino Loy saying never more than 12, and the episode ends. Oh, and knowing it was going to be a week before we got to see what happened as a result of that, but like just the weight of I swear to you, some complete stranger could come up to me and just say never more than 12, and I'd be like, yes, I'm with you.
I know what you mean, Andrew, but I also find that actually, because the way that the show is structured, it's kind of centered around having 3 episodes telling one story before it moves on to the next set of episodes. In some ways, in the first and second season, I was actually I was sort of more dying to see what would happen next in between the arcs finishing and starting, because with Aldani, the way that 3rd episode ends is such a for me it's okay, well, where do we go from here? What's the next step in the story of the rebellion? And then you get the next set of episodes and they're kind of set sort of a period later and it kind of feels a bit more like, okay, what we're seeing now is more the sort of status quo. This is more what these characters are kind of going to be up to for a while. And just like having to wait to see what was going to come next as the sort of next set of episodes, that next trio of episodes was also like a really, I don't want to have to wait. I just want to see what happens. What's the next batch that we're going to get coming?
Yeah, the peak for me, obviously that cliffhanger is fantastic on Narkina 5, but then getting the One Way Out kind of breakout sequence into the Luthen Rael monologue, I just felt like it was transcendent when I was watching it. I thought there's no way this will be topped for like Star Wars in general. Thought have we peaked here? And I'm pleased to say season 2 is probably as good as season 1, maybe better in some moments. So I'm glad it didn't peak there.
Yeah. It's really bizarre for me as well, because when it comes to Star Wars, there's obviously a lot of content, and personally, I'm a huge fan of the original trilogy. But then outside of that, I don't really have much of a connection to everything else, and I always thought that the thing that was going to get me back into Star Wars was going to be something that would be able to capture that fantastical, magical, fun mood of those original 3 films before the movies became about things like the Trade Federation and stuff like that. But I never expected that the first thing that I would watch from, just in terms of Star Wars for years, would be something this mature and I don't want to say well written, but just really, really adult, and taking the universe of Star Wars and just turning it into a really, really, just a very mature, grown-up show with very grown-up storytelling and ideas, and in particular the ISB and the way they function. That could have been easily a really dull, boring concept, but then having this system for which you can kind of see Imperial operations through, and then how that impacts every other facet of what's going on in the rest of the story, a little bit like in The Wire, is it's really, really good. And I never expected to have something like that from Star Wars, because it's tried to do, to a certain extent, things like that in the past, like shows about bureaucratic things and stuff like that, and hasn't really worked very well. But I mean, in this case, they absolutely stuck the landing.
I guess it's grown with the audience, right? The people that kind of made Andor would have seen Star Wars when they grew up. Obviously, it kind of also helps that Tony Gilroy is probably more interested in real history than Star Wars lore. That he has scenes where characters will try and go to a phone box and watch TV and doing things that you don't necessarily think about as being Star Wars things.
Yeah.
And he's I don't want to go too much into the behind the scenes stuff, because he's been very generous with his time in terms of giving interviews around season 2. So I feel like you could do a podcast just talking about things Tony Gilroy said about Andor. Yeah, the fact that it takes so much from real history, it's the first thing I think which makes the Empire feel like a genuine threat. That you can kind of understand why people would hate them so much, why they are so kind of feared, and I think that largely is because of how much it's drawing on real kind of fascist regimes. and not to be too much of the person like our current moment, but especially when you watch the first arc of season 2, you're like this, and then Gorman as well. You feel like God, this really has been written for this moment, even though all is doing is calling on things that have happened in our past.
And again, not to spend too much time just regurgitating Tony Gilroy's words, but he did say of people saying, "Wow, how did you predict that the world was going to be like this when you were writing this stuff like however many years ago?" His answer is like, I just looked at history, and if you look at human history, we spent more of our time at war and hurting each other than we have living in times of peace. So it's not difficult to I just wrote about stuff from history. The fact that it looks like now is just how humans are. It's not that I have predictive powers or anything.
Jumping into the kind of the first arc on the back of that point, the fact that one of the first things after a fantastic opening sequence we see is essentially the Star Wars version of the Wanasi final solution conference. The Empire planning a genocide in meticulous detail, talking about the kind of the propaganda they've put out, and coming up with the strategy to eliminate a culture and a kind of a people, and it sort of takes from real history there, treats it with the utmost seriousness, while also kind of being an entertaining scene with them kind of watching like a slideshow, having the Krennic character of Rogue One, who is kind of a cartoon character when put in the context of Andor. Like he really kind of, I think it works, but he does stick out like a sore thumb in how kind of theatrical that performance is. I thought that, and kind of setting out that this season is going to be about Gorman and the Gorman massacre, which I'm aware is like a thing in Star Wars lore. I thought was a really strong way to start.
Yeah. Just the energy it gets with that meeting, starting with the video, everyone just kind of looking around confused, like,
why are we watching a tourist information video?
Just the fact it does just kind of land as I don't know, a slightly bad meeting held by your superior where he tried to make it a bit fun.
Feels almost like a joke, and then you realise they're planning a genocide. It's, I don't know. I do think this will be something we'll probably talk about more as this goes on, but I do think the show does know when to add moments of lightness and humour to alleviate the incredible weight of dread that permeates a lot of the episodes. It does know when to lift things slightly.
I think Arc 1 is a good example of that. And even the opening sequence, where Cassian kind of gives this monologue about rebellion, feeling like coming home to yourself, this kind of beautiful, touching moment with this kind of nameless Imperial traitor. I think she has the line with I can't, like, it's been a lot of fun. Cutting to him epically failing to steal this kind of this vehicle in a kind of inversion of like the kind of the Star Wars starfighter kind of sequence that we're so used to. And then the fact that for Act 1 he's essentially stranded in a kind of comedic situation of these kind of two warring factions and these like bumbling idiots. I think that's a kind of good example of that tone.
Yeah, well, the inversion as well on like the difficult thing was, although it was difficult flying it out of there, that's episode 1 he gets that done. The next 2 episodes he is stuck on the just getting somewhere else.
The Imperial base, sneaking in, stealing the ship. I mean, stealing the ship, a little bit problematic, but otherwise fine. That's, he's done with that quickly, and then it's 2 episodes of being stuck
infighting
with these rebels who just don't seem to understand that they're on the same bloody side.
Yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head there a little bit, Andrew, because that was the first 3 episodes. My least favourite content was the stuff with Andor, mainly out of frustration, just because those episodes kind of it annoyed me how they just weren't being able to come together in a collaborative way at all. And I also did think their dialogue was a little bit shoddy, to be honest. It kind of reminded me a little bit of like the sort of stuff that we would write when we were doing GCSE drama at times. I just didn't think their dialogue was as good as the rest of the show. For me, my favourite content is the Mon Mothma wedding part. Mainly because, for me, like the most crucial plot point in those 3 episodes is this one character who's clearly becoming a little bit more of a liability to certain individuals, and Luthen's decision to make quite a drastic choice, I think, says a lot about his character and how much he's committed to the rebellion. Because for me, a lot of this show, that the main sort of themes are about sacrifice and commitment to something and just going and going and going and basically not even considering the idea of loss. And sometimes that takes you into ruthless territory. And I think you learn a lot about Luthen in those few episodes. And then you also learn a lot about Mon as well, because I don't think in those episodes she's kind of fully cut out for how... You almost need to sell a part of yourself a little bit to be part of the rebellion, and I think Luthen did that a long time ago, and I think with Mon it takes her a little bit longer to actually understand those kinds of things, and I think it makes for really, really good interactions between those two characters in those episodes as well.
Yeah, it's how nice for you, right? Is the line he says to her.
Yeah. But she says she doesn't know what he means, and he says, "How nice for you."
I love the reveal of Cinta
Angel
being like
of
the
Death.
Grim
Yeah.
Reaper.
Yeah. I'm just enjoying looking at the Wikipedia like summary for the episode, where it's just like Luthen informs Mothma that he's decided to have him killed about Take Holmer. It was like, technically no, he never says anything as direct as that. It's clear that's what's
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
For all we know, Tay Colmer is fine. He was just, dropped off at a retirement home by.
he actually he went
Back to his
that,
home planet.
The big farm planet upstate. If you look in the
Yes,
background
he's been taken to the farm
with
planet.
Bix at the very end, he's actually there cutting some crops.
No, I think Mon does, when she's talking to Luthen later, does say, "Do you remember Tay Colmer?"
Yeah.
It's pretty clear he does die.
Yeah.
It's all implication though, isn't it? Like Tay never explicitly kind of comes out and threatens. It's and and they never explicitly say we're going to kill Tay Colmer. It's all kind of written around.
Yeah.
I think the actual the sequence of bringing all the characters together is fantastic. Kind of craftsmanship as well. I think the tracking shot where it's Mon kind of walking down as people are parking at the wedding, and then you bring in Luthen and Claire. You bring in Take Home, you kind of bring Vel back. It's a great kind of reintroduction to these characters, and a really kind of, I guess, narratively kind of interesting sequence.
Yeah, the tradition of it all, the struggle between, one's more progressive views, and then having to both sell out her family, but also, to a certain extent, I don't know, the struggle of is this what her daughter wants?
They've all got their own rebellion, right? Like Ethan saying it's kind of about sacrifice. I mean, we see her sacrifice at the end of season 1, essentially. The decision to sell her daughter into like a child marriage with a gangster to cover her back, and then her reluctance for it to go ahead, but her daughter's rebellion is kind of like almost returning back to that tradition. It's like those kind of like racist 20-year-olds who love Trump, because it's like the counterculture in their mind.
Yeah.
And then her kind of just letting it all go in that kind of final montage kind of dance sequence, which to kind of culminate the arc as it's cutting around in a way that a season of The Wire would. It's kind of closing montage, which I thought was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, the music choice helps with it quite a lot, and the way it abruptly cuts out with the cut to black right at the end. It's a very good stylistic choice.
Yeah, although I was screaming at the TV that they left B behind. Left. I love Brasso. R.I.P. Brasso, but leaving B behind on that wee planet.
We do get closure on
Thank
that.
God we do.
They didn't forget about him.
Yeah. Oh.
He's fine. He has a new droid friend. It's it's all good.
Yeah, just him like chilling by Brassos like a rotting corpse, asking it when Cassian's gonna show up.
like one of those dogs that stays by their master's grave until they die themselves.
What do you guys think of the kind of, I guess the wheat, well, probably the wheat planet is probably the biggest thing, but then also I guess we've got the comedic kind of guess who's coming to dinner plot line with Cyril and Dedra, which I really enjoyed.
The revelation that Deidre and Cyril are together almost broke me as a person. I was there, mouth agape, staring in disbelief at the TV screen, going, "My God, the madmen! They did it! They made it happen! They're together! This is incredible!" And then having Edie turn up for dinner and just having a mother-in-law dinner thing in this, the best Star Wars we're ever going to get, that also inexplicably has like people eating fondue with their mother-in-law.
Well, you're dripping.
It's like I don't have the words to describe it. It's transcendent, is what it is. It's transcendent. I can't I can't really talk about it because what is there to say? It's
yeah, as a start as well, where you have for your heroes, it's all looking kind of bleak and horrible, and it feels like they are just having the worst days of their life. And then you're cutting to the two of the more villains that you've spent the most time with, and they just seem to have it looks an awkward
Cyril
life,
Khan
but it is
having one of the worst days of his new life with Deidre, with his mum turning up, having to go and lie on the bed to get away from the horror of it all. Meanwhile, Brasso and Wilman and Bix, they're on this farm planet being like, how are we going to make sure we don't get rounded up by the Imperials and killed?
Yeah. ICE is after us.
Yeah, I mean, it did really feel kind of like an Inglourious Bastards. Those kind of Imperials kind of going around to the houses, and the kind of the attempted sexual assault of like an undocumented migrant. It did hit pretty close to home. I kind of respect that they didn't pussy out, that they don't leave it all to implication, but they have Bix come out and just say, like, he actually tried to rape me. I thought that scene did really work. I understand that there was discourse around it. I don't know what you guys kind of thought about that.
It's an intense thing to put in a TV series, but this is a show that has handled grown-up and serious things and has handled them well. So I for one have no problem with it being part of the series, because this is a thing that happens in these situations. This stuff happens, and yeah, pretending it doesn't happen in Star Wars. I don't know what. I don't know why you would do that.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing that I was talking about earlier, in the sense that I was just almost staggered with that first season at just how mature and grown up like all the storytelling is, and this is just another example of that. Like, people that work for the Empire, like Imperial officers, you have to imagine that a lot of them are going to be, they're going to have very abusive tendencies. And it's also just not the first example of these kinds of really serious topics where you've got to be sensitive about it. Like, in the next kind of few episodes of the show, you've got Bex dealing with a serious level of trauma that you don't know if she's actually going to get through, and then she has substance abuse issues as well. So it's like, I think it feels like a kind of show where every step of the way there is something really grown up that it's trying to tackle or explore in some way. And I don't think there was ever any moment at all in the entire show where I just thought, this is really immature or done childishly. Like, it's done. It's very impactful, it's very effective, and it's handled well for the most part.
The main issue is just some of the it's the people just trying to make content by saying stupid things on the internet.
Well, like Darth Vader wouldn't have stood for it.
It has inspired some great memes. Has that Mr. Strangle his wife.
I mean, we've got more strangling of women coming up.
Oh, yeah.
I thought maybe, unless anyone else has anything to say about the first arc, we could move on and maybe put the second and third arc together and just kind of talk about Gorman as a whole.
Yeah, because it does feel a bit like a 6-episode kind of saga. This one, doesn't it?
I guess it's kind of 5, and then there's the kind of Mon Mothma episode as well.
That's true. That's true.
But yeah, do you guys have anything more to say about the first 3 eps?
Just a small point that it is interesting that essentially Brasso dies off screen. Like, we see him running away, we see the stormtrooper readying their gun and firing, and then later we see Brasso's body being discovered. I think it's interesting that so many of the people, well, I say so many, at this point in the show, Cassian's mum, Marva, and Brasso, his best friend, have both died when he wasn't there to be there, and for us, as the viewer, it's happened essentially off screen.
That's a good point.
I think that's an interesting approach to have taken to it, and I do think, to dip back I'll try to be quick. To dip back briefly to the first series, I do think it was a very bold choice to just have Marva die off screen while Cassian wasn't there, because, again, this show doesn't shy away from the things that happen in reality, and sometimes your loved one dies when you are not there to have a moment with them before they pass, and it sucks, but it happens.
What an absolute fucking legend Brasso is as well. Like the last act we see him do is like his first
He's
act
trying to save his friends
of lying to give people alibis.
Yeah.
What a man.
Yeah, and even what he's doing when he is shot is he is trying to find Wilman to save Wilman.
Another transcendent moment in season 1 is the Marva monologue into Brasso using the brick as a weapon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So Ethan, as our kind of resident kind of Gorman expert, do you want to give us the background on season 2?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I could actually do this entire section in French or Gorman if you wanted. It's completely up to you. These episodes are like super strong. I mean, they feel like the real, I guess, meat and potatoes of the second season to me, because you basically see what is to me the thing that fully kickstarts the rebellion, that like gets it properly moving, and it kind of all culminates in that last episode, episode 8 or episode 9, where you have the Gorman woman on the radio trying to speak out to the rest of the galaxy to inform them what's going on.
Is anyone listening?
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so effectively what you've got is the Empire have decided to kind of go forward with their plans to, in quotation marks, steal this resource from the center of the Gorman planet to try and fund some kind of, I think it's like some kind of space travel. I think that's the sort of the kind of like guys that they're going with. But then kind of before that, the main thing that everyone's talking about is this armory that they're trying to build, and then you've got a local group of Gormans on this planet who are very unhappy about it, and get this really great episode where they try and stop a cargo going towards this this armory, and yeah, it all culminates in a really, really fantastic episode where you see like the real like the real horrific things that the Empire have decided to do to try and basically stage an excuse for them to do what it is that they've always wanted to do in the first place, which is have an excuse to pretty much destroy the planet in order to get the thing that they want from it. And yeah, I mean, as a 5 or 6 episode arc, it's just really, really well told. It's powerful. You've got some really good sequences towards the end of Gorman protests happening. That again, kind of similar to everything that we've talked about so far. I was kind of shocked at how dark that part of the episode was. Like, I wasn't expecting it to hit as hard as it was, but it was the way they shot it that just made you feel like every blaster shot that was being fired and every Gorman that fell to the ground, it was really, really well done. I mean, I'm sure you guys agree as well.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the fact that there's no blood or very little blood kind of means I think you can get away with a little bit more than you would normally be able to. But I think they push right up into the limit of what you can feasibly show in good taste in something that is Star Wars.
The brutality of the KX security droids, where they're just picking up people and throwing them into walls, and just horrifying, and just again that this is I don't know, and the use of music as well in Andor as a whole, in the first series, like the music of the funeral procession on Rick's Road, and again the singing of the anthem in Palmo Square on Gorman. I could genuinely tear up and probably start crying just listening to the Gorman anthem, because it's man.
I think the decision not to go too into like the behind the scenes, but the decision to spend so much of the budget to build that set of the square, and you spend so much time there, I think was really smart. And obviously they knew that it's ultimately going to culminate in this, so they're like, how many people can we get into here? What are the mechanics of this space?
To have as well, seeing it from one of the people you hear kind of describe the area is the person working in that hotel who Andor speaks to, and sort of saying how people don't like the window views because you look out into the monument. I don't know. You get just this weight of living there from the people.
It feels like a very real place, and the genius move of having all of these little shops and cafes that are important to the plot and where the characters are having meetings really works to cement it as a physical place.
Walk into work each morning,
and
leaving at the end of the day.
He gets that spider from that guy each day.
Yeah.
The Cyril arc, I think is across these episodes is really strong. Like the way it drops you in to Cyril's now working here, you know, talking on the phone to his mum about how she shouldn't be watching Fox News and stuff, and then you can kind of work out as the audience that this is all a play, you know, on Dedra's part, which is obviously slowly revealed to you. But then I guess when you jump ahead a year, which we've not actually talked about, the fact you jump ahead a year in between the arcs, and you know, he kind of is almost. It's too little too late, but he does kind of have a change of conscience, even if it isn't, like, you know, he doesn't fully defect to the Empire, but his worldview is kind of shattered as he's kind of face to face with the brutality of what is about to happen and what is happening in front of him.
I do really wonder what this is. These two arcs are like the ones where I feel most like I wanted more, like I wanted more episodes of this, because I would love to know. I mean, again, it's fine. The show works fine without it, but I would love to know what happened between Cyril and the Gorman resistance that means they don't trust him by the start of the second arc. Like, what happened? Why aren't they listening to him? And what did they figure out about him? How have his feelings changed? Because
I assumed that it was that the information that he was feeding them, they could kind of slowly see more and more that there's, you know, that there's something else there, and he's not being entirely honest with them. I just kind of assumed that that's what was happening in between. But no, I completely know what you mean, Andrew. Like, we were talking about this the other day, how it's a show that works as 2 seasons, absolutely, like, no question. But you could have easily made another season of the show, maybe even 2 seasons of the show, and had stuff like this play out on like a larger scale, or have other arcs that all contribute to the overarching story about the birth of the rebellion, right? Or slowly kind of leading towards the concept of the Death Star being introduced. They could have easily done it. They've got a great roster of actors there to do it as well. It would have been achievable, and it's a shame that we'll never get more seasons of Andor, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, while I 100% agree with that, and, you know, I would never have complained if they'd stuck to the original plan of doing a season a year. There's something about the narrative constraints of season 2, I think, that are really strong. That we're always barreling forward. You know, you get 3 episodes, which is normally set over 3 days, to kind of acclimatize to where we are, and then suddenly a bunch of stuff's happened off screen, and we're getting closer and closer. This kind of sense of impending doom the entire season has. The fact that we know the fate of the main character, we're kind of spiraling towards his death, and then with Gorman as well, that there just isn't the time. You know, we set up Gorman, and then the next arc we have Partagaz with the line, you know, bad luck Gorman. Suddenly, you know, there isn't the time anymore. The Empire are moving in already, and it's.
I mean, to us,
you know, there's nothing these people could have done.
Within the first 3 episodes, there's kind of the feeling of. I think a lot of the dynamic for me is between Andor and Luthen, and well, also the Cellot Gorman, of this feeling of it's too late for Gorman already. They are behind in the war. All they can do is choose how they lose.
They are only just starting to organise, and the Empire is already here and is already has a fortress, basically.
Like Andor kind of correctly assesses the scene of it is too late to have anything more than bodies pile up on the street, and then tells that to Luthen, who says, we need the bodies on the street.
Yeah, we need people to see the bodies on the street so they know what it is we're
These are
fighting
middle
against.
Class
Yeah,
bodies.
people will notice if there is a massacre on Gorman.
And it's so interesting as well that then you cut to basically Partagaz, and it's the same conversation of, well, this is what we need in order to go big. It's both sides moving, escalating.
Yeah, because the rebellion needs something like this to raise awareness as well. Like it's super critical to them too, what goes on.
Both forces want the same things. Ultimately, what you watch is 6 episodes of characters running around, doing things that, in the kind of wider sense, don't really matter or affect things. But it still feels like they do. You know, it still feels just as important, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something about the fact that, like, I'm not a Star Wars lore expert by any means, but the Gorman massacre being something that we know canonically happens in Star Wars, and it's mentioned, in Rebels, and it's mentioned in other things. The fact that this is like a fixed point that they were working towards on the show, which kind of lends this inevitability, but also the decision, as far as I understand in Legends, this kind of Tarkin landing is the Gorman massacre.
Yeah,
but
that's what
they're them going, no, that happened, and then we're going to do something even more fucked up on top of it.
That is such a good change. I feel the fact as well, I can't remember exactly when they said Tarkin's landing happened in the new shift, but it seems like it's.
I think it was 10 years ago or something.
Yeah, so
possibly,
it feels
at the time they say. It was earlier on in the. It wasn't that long after the end of the Clone Wars, I think. Fairly early on in the days of the Empire.
Yeah, because I wasn't sure with the timing as if that possibly even fell pre-Empire, but.
No, it's post-Empire, but
only
a little bit post-Empire, because the bellboy in the hotel is talking about how it was when he was a child, and he's a fairly young-looking man. So I think it is about 10 years earlier, the Tarkin Gorman massacre.
In kind of having the characters able to kind of play around, we do get some fun sequences. Obviously Cyril doing his kind of amateur spy stuff is fun. But then Cassian in that second arc, going as the fashion designer, Varian Sky.
You see him go to a place to work out what his to be told what his alter ego will be. Him listening into it to train up his history, and then. Also, the next bit of showing just how involved and professional he is by this point, when the Gorman cell sort of rushes, and he's sort of no, your OPSEC is bad on
you're
this.
Doing this wrong. You don't know who I am yet.
Yeah.
I could be an Imperial agent. You have fucked up. You are not instilling me with confidence here, and you are meant to be trying to make yourself
not
look
paranoid enough.
Yeah, you are new to this, and I'm not impressed.
The fact that he and Luthen want to move slow, but because of the way the show's set out, we get 3 episodes a year, and Star Wars is coming. there is no time to be slow. I mean, Luthen almost becomes redundant by the third arc, right? When suddenly Yavin's been set up off screen, and we're in a familiar Star Wars location, and Luthen's a fringe figure. That's kind of how quickly this moves. Between arcs, this huge kind of pivotal plot point kind of happens, and it's this kind of big shift of an organized kind of rebel alliance. I don't know, what do you guys kind of think of that decision? And I guess, do we have any more to say about Gorman? We've not really talked about the kind of the Cyril Cassian kind of encounter. Yeah,
I've got a couple of things to say about the whole Yavin kind of forming off screen a little bit. First of all, I think you mentioned this to me, Harry, as well. We talked about it briefly, but the first arc of the season ending with I don't think it exactly ends with it, but you kind of seeing that they're on Yavin, I think is kind of a nice moment that obviously becomes more important later. But I quite like that Yavin gets kind of set up off screen. Firstly, because it's just one season, it's difficult for them to do anything else. But secondly, just because I like all of the Luthen content towards the end of the season, which I guess we'll touch up on a little bit later on, which is all about how he's like the OG, right? He's the original gangster, and everything has sort of like spiraled out from him. And I know that he didn't exist in the film Rogue One, but just this feeling of like somebody almost being forgotten a little bit, even though they're so important, kind of feels really like significant to me. And I just like the idea that he inspired something that has just had repercussions across the galaxy, and even though he's probably not been directly involved with everything that forms on Yavin, he has still been instrumental in like the construction of the rebellion. And I think Clea has some really great lines about how he's almost treated a little bit like Forrest Whitaker in this show. He's kind of treated almost like a rogue agent and not somebody who's I guess really part of the cause in the same way that they are on Yavin. But without him, they wouldn't really be there, would they?
I mean, Luthen himself discusses all this in his speech in the first series to
Johnny Long? Lonnie Young.
Lonnie Young.
Indeed.
Yep.
Yeah, his whole thing of like, I will struggle in the shadows. I will, absolutely ruin myself for this, and no one will remember me. And I won't live to see the things that Yeah. And he's right. He is totally right about basically everything he says in that.
Yeah, because I think what this show does a good job of expanding on as a sequel to Rogue One is that feeling of in the sort of finale moments of Rogue One where they're on Scarif and all of these people you have met are all going to do one tiny massive thing to allow the Death Star plans to get out, basically, and who is actually left to remember those names is sort of what you have happen across all of this, where like I think a lot of this comes down to Nemik's manifesto, and just the like small acts of rebellion.
Every act of insurrection, however small, pushes our lines forward. Yeah,
and it's that sort of stuff across the whole series, and to me sort of culminate when this is later, but Partagaz listening to that and the manifesto and saying, who is this? Do we this nameless person? And
it's about the real people in this world. Like, I know it sounds like a stupid thing to say, but these are the sacrifices that the kind of ordinary people are making in the kind of hopes of something extraordinary. The kind of the line, "the sunrise will never see," which obviously calls to kind of that's pretty much the last thing Cassian's ever going to see.
Andor and Vel drinking to the people they've lost along the way and thinking on the people on Aldhani. And the sort of moment, I think Vel kind of says of like, I've heard people say that they were a part of that crew, and I'd like I can't remember what she says about.
It's almost become
it.
like a folkloric thing
Yeah.
that you can, like boast about being a part of, even if you weren't.
Yeah, but it's like by that point, there's only 3 people alive who actually know who it was on
Yeah.
on Aldani.
I think going back to Aldani, I think that's another thing that I actually think is so strong about those episodes. It's the sense that you're right. It's about like microaggression. It's about making yourself be heard and aware of. And even though what they are doing isn't the most detrimental thing to the Empire, I mean, they're just stealing like payroll for like a bunch of troopers. It's still that they find a way to make it feel incredibly significant, and also like the concept of like the whole objective of those episodes is to steal payroll. It's like such an original, interesting concept of a thing to do in like a story that I haven't really seen done before as well. So
the line that Dedra has, where she's like, it wasn't a robbery, it was an announcement.
Yeah. I mean,
exactly.
that money wasn't just... I mean, it was to start buying things for the rebellion. Like, who knows how much of the equipment on Yavin was bought with money that got stolen from Aldani? How many X-wings were paid for with the Aldani funds? Borrowing from the knowledge of Tony Gilroy, the Aldani heist was inspired by Stalin being the reason he got big with the communists back in the early days was he knew how to rob banks, and they needed money, and he was good at robbing banks, so or at least getting people together to rob banks. So that's what Tony Gilroy was inspired by for the Aldani heist.
They do a very kind of clever thing where they manage to make the fact that they have to adhere to like the canon set out in an animated TV show kind of work in episode 9. In that there is an animated episode where Mon Mothma gets rescued and taken to a rebel base. So they use that as an opportunity to kind of make a point about how history's been kind of rewritten. And the rebels are doing their own type of kind of storytelling. And keeping these kind of these grimy kind of Saw Gerrera and Luthen kind of, like figures in the shadows.
No, as far as the history is concerned, Mon Mothma was rescued from Coruscant by a rebellion squadron. What it would have been? I can't remember what squadron it would have been.
Gold
Squadron.
By the cartoon characters.
Yeah, I mean that's.
It was saved by Dave Filoni, but we know Tony Gilroy's really in the kind of gutter with us.
Yes. But yeah, though, as far as history is concerned, like, she was saved by, a proper military wing of the rebellion, whereas in fact she was saved because Luthen and Claire hastily threw together a quick shit Senator Bail Organa's rescue plan is fucked. Who can we get on short notice? Cassian, you're good, right?
You're
get
still
in here.
reeling from a failed assassination attempt. I feel like we've not really thought too much on the 6th episode, or Cinta, and also Skolden's investiture party with Krennic and Mothma.
I'd forgotten about that. Fucking hell.
That's such a tense scene.
I do distinctly remember, just quickly covering the Cintra and Vel stuff, the very moment they were like reuniting and reconnecting, I can't remember if I said this out loud to you, John. Certainly I thought it in my head, which was just basically, please don't fridge these lesbians, please. Please, Mr. Gilroy, don't fridge these lesbians. And in fairness, I don't think it's a fridging. I don't think that's the correct term, but I do... man, still very sad. Still
It's
very sad that
devastating.
Cinta died.
Yeah.
It's just... man. Yes. Anyway, to the fun, all the joyful fun of Krennic and Mon Mothma having a battle of words.
Just the immediate I've not seen you since the
committee hearings into your. Or something like how nice to not see you in the witness stand or whatever.
Yeah.
The moment where they successfully get it out and it's Claire and Luthen walking away, and I think Claire makes the joke about we should kill Krennic.
We should have just killed Krennic, and that is the perfect example of the show knowing exactly when to make a joke to lighten the mood. Because I was so stressed after that scene. I was like, bent double under the weight of the tension, and then they just did that, and I was like laughing uncontrollably just because it was nice to not be stressed for a moment.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Another moment going kind of back to the Mon Mothma stuff in episode 9 that I think is quite funny but also has stuck with me is the Cassian killing her driver, kind of like being like hey and then shooting him, and then just the kind of reaction that she has to that of like, oh yeah, she's never seen someone die before. This is ostensibly someone that was raised in the upper class, a child bride, been a kind of liberal politician her whole life, that's now, as Cassian says, welcomed into the rebellion.
And not just this is maybe her first time seeing someone murdered, this is someone she knew for years. And granted, she knew he was an Imperial spy, but he was still her driver. She will have chatted to him basically every day for the last
made a point
6
of knowing
years.
His name, which Perrin seemingly never did.
Yeah, there is also, again, you can tell this show is Star Wars because it's like poetry, it rhymes. You have Cassian asking what's that guy's name in exactly totally different circumstances, to Perrin in the first series asking what's that guy's name, and in Perrin's case it's just because he's casually classist, and in Andor's case it's because he needs to shoot the guy and wants him to be distracted so he won't shoot back.
The fact that episode, this is a bit of a jump backwards, but that episode being called Welcome to the Rebellion, which is obviously the line Cassian says, the episode before being called Who Are You, being the thing that Cassian says when he finally comes face to face with Cyril, I think it was again one of the strongest moments of the show. The Cyril's world collapsing in on itself to suddenly seeing Cassian, after you as the audience, like willing them to kind of meet because they kept just crossing paths, and suddenly he just this is the guy he has to kill. This is the only thing that matters.
A fun other bit of poetry is in Rogue One when Krennic walks out onto the on Scarif. Beneath the big dish, walks out to find Jyn Erso there. He also asks, "Who are you?" Similarly, as his world is falling apart, being like, "Why are you doing this? Why are you destroying everything I've been working for?"
Yeah, I'm glad we've come back onto the subject of Cyril a little bit, because we talked about him a little bit earlier, and that episode towards the start of the season where it's with him with his mum and Deirdre, it was a good episode, and I did like it, and I did like those scenes. But up until that point, for me in the show, he had been one of the characters that I disliked seeing the most, because I thought that he was kind of bordering on slapstick at times. He's supposed to be there for comic relief, didn't really feel that important or critical to the plot, was just kind of there to provide something different, and for me personally it didn't work. But then in the 6 episodes on Gorman, like the way they utilised his character made me basically have a complete U-turn on him, because he becomes so much more important, and then the kind of the morality of what he's doing, and then the way that he reflects on that in his final episode is the best content that he has in the entire episode. And I'm glad that, at least for me, the way that his story ends is in a really, really strong way with some of his best content in the entire show, because I think that's kind of ideally how you want most characters' final moments to be, some of the best.
That kind of decimation of his character across those 3 episodes, his worldview collapsing in itself, he's gone from one kind of domineering woman in his life to another. He's kind of feels like he's found his place, in the world finally, kind of serving kind of what he thinks is order, only for that to implode on himself. Him kind of assaulting Dedra in quite an upsetting kind of scene as well. I don't know if you guys had any strong thoughts about that.
It led me down a weird rabbit hole of like, is it okay to domestically assault your wife if she's a Nazi? I don't think so, but also that's getting into weird territory where I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. Is it? And again, why is he doing that in that moment? What is going through his head in that moment? Is it because I don't think he's actually angry that she's a Nazi, because I feel like he's known that for a long time.
No, I think he feels that she kept something from him and has almost manipulated him in a way this entire time, right?
He's bought the lie that it is outside agitators.
And he's also, I mean, I think she says this afterwards, after he has like strangled her and released her, but when she says, "You didn't seem to mind the promotions," I do think that is the bit that breaks him, because the one thing I am certain Cyril has wanted more than anything is like approval from people, and to just do a good job and be recognised for it. And the idea that he has not been recognised, transparently obvious, he wants someone to pat him on the head and tell him he's a really good Imperial boy, and the realisation that he has just been a patsy, like the things he's achieved haven't been because of how hard he's worked or how clever he's been, it's because he's been doing what they wanted and they've been tricking him this whole time, and actually, you know, he's just as much of a failure as he ever was. He's just been a slightly more useful failure this time.
His the scene where he meets Partagaz and Partagaz compliments him and kind of then leaves the room. That really kind of made me laugh.
Just when he tells Deidre, like, maybe I should, maybe it's not appropriate to say this, but this is like the happiest day of my life, and she just looks at him with disdain and is like, "I'm happy for you."
Oh. Yeah, their kind of sex scene that isn't a sex scene is great as well, where she's just like, "Turn off the lights." Two freaks that you know found their place, I think, in this world. Who are you is such a devastating line. Like, I feel like even had he not been shot straight after that moment, I think he might have just like died of you know, everything he's ever known kind of imploding.
I feel like he may have just dropped the gun and left or something. Yeah.
He goes full Padme and dies of a broken heart.
Dies of a broken ego.
Just quickly on Gorman, I feel like we'd be remiss not to shout out how fantastic the production design is in this show. You know, the ability to create a full planet, a culture, even if it is just, you know, the French
language.
I mean, across
a language,
everything,
like all of the clothing. And
it's clothing for Chandrilla and the weddings. I don't know why I said weddings plural. It was just one. That is great. I mean, then also. Yeah. Then going, well, now we're next going to be on like a fashion planet, so everyone's also going to be beautifully dressed, and we will make Gorman look beautiful.
To be fair, I feel like Star Wars generally has always had really solid like costume design work and makeup. Yeah, I mean, think about Naboo, for Christ's sake. I mean, it's a very beautiful place. Like, it must have been so fun to shoot all of those scenes. Well, wherever in the world they shot them, the ones that were, you know, not computer generated or anything.
Yeah, there aren't many TV shows who, you know, the production designer is a producer, but Andor is one of the few. And it's amazing how it has film quality production despite being television.
It's essentially cost as much as making, I can't remember if it was like, I think this was the same as making like 3 of would be like The Last Jedis.
Did it cost like 500 or 600 million to make? I think I read that somewhere.
The figure I've seen is 650.
Right.
We'll never get anything like this again, just because it came at exactly the right time of Disney and Star Wars rolling out. We want to make as much shit as possible, and then the Disney Plus arriving, the streaming boom, that kind of bubble that's popped, everything kind of just pre-COVID, pre-strikes in Hollywood. I think it was just, we'll never see this budget put on this type of project again. I just don't think that moment's ever going to come. I'm not saying we'll never get anything as good as this, but I don't think we'll ever get this level of money and this much creative freedom for something that doesn't really appeal to general audiences, but is just a fantastic show for kind of adults, especially something like in a world like Star Wars. Just a miracle season of TV, really.
Well, shall we move on to the final arc now?
Speaking of Naboo, I think I remember thinking to myself, what is actually left to wrap up here? Obviously, Rogue One's coming. I feel like after Gorman and they get Mon Mothma out, thinking what is left, and I thought it just has to be the Axis stuff. It has to be Luthen, and it has to be Dedra, and there has to be some kind of showdown, and we get it quite early on. The kind of reveal that Lonnie has discovered the Death Star. His kind of tragic demise, and then this showdown between these characters who she was hunting him all throughout the first season. I kind of wondered what you think of the final arc and the first episode of it.
Such a strong
I
episode.
think the first episode might be the best of the three, to be completely honest. But maybe that's just because it was it was an episode kind of told through the lens of one character, really, and their experiences with the character that they're about to go and, well, from a certain point of view, rescue, I guess, or save. But yeah, no, I just thought those episodes were really, really strong, to be honest. And it must have been kind of difficult to do in such a good way because, as you said, it's leading up to Rogue One. How can you have 3 episodes of a show lead into a film and find a way to make them in some way climactic? And I think the show did that. I mean, the third last episode and then the penultimate episode are probably the more kind of action-packed episodes. Although, actually, no, maybe not. Maybe because the third one starts off with you see what happens when they kind of get cornered in that apartment, don't you? So yeah, maybe I'm being a bit wrong, but that final episode, it is just kind of like it's almost like I don't know how to describe it, but it's like a summary, and it's just trying to lead you really effortlessly into the film. So yeah, probably really difficult episodes to think about and figure out how we actually going to make this work in a somewhat climactic way, and I think they do a really good job.
I guess the real kind of strength of these final episodes is the kind of the reveal of not so much that I felt like we needed a backstory to Luthen and kind of Clea, but how revealing that those kind of flashbacks were, and how Clea kind of becomes the main character of the show for these last 3 episodes. I think the kind of the episodes told from her point of view, with the kind of flashbacks, her memories, the reveal that Luthen's kind of his rebellion really is her rebellion, that she's kind of as much the driving force of all of this than he is. I thought it was fantastic. I really enjoy the sequence. She's kind of working in the hospital. They think it's like a team of 3 professionals. Yeah, and I guess also Luthen's final sacrifice of him killing himself. I love the encounter he has with Dedra. And I guess the hubris of Dedra as well, that she's been collecting these emails and has tried to do this herself and fumbles the bag.
Yeah, it's brilliant as well that she does it on a day where I think it's Yurt is on annual leave.
He's on leave.
That's just it's so human.
Yeah,
in a weird way, like to have to have your ISB. And just to think, like, he had a day off work. I don't know. I don't know. That's I think one of its examples of having such an interesting moment for Daedra and the way that she's working around the systems that she's in. But then also it is a way that expands the whole feel of like, these are, I don't know, humans living in a space as much as they are terrifying ISB agents.
Faceless gears of fascist government.
But the fact
sorry to interrupt. No, continue. I will say mine.
The stuff I've seen has resonated with me is it's sort of saying how originally that side of Daedra, the part of her that was flaunting the rules in order to get results, was in season 1. That's what helped her
rise up the ranks.
Get the eye of Partagaz, and her sort of being like, look, I know we have these boundaries and these restrictions, but actually they're getting in the way of us getting these results. And then it is sort of encouraged from her until sort of this moment where it blows up in all their faces, and she is then dismissed fairly immediately. But you see within the fact that it was just floating around stuff that people in like Krennic's team knew was essential for catching Luthen, and if that had been accessed earlier, possibly something could have happened before the rebellion flew away.
Yeah, this relates into the point I nearly interrupted you to make, which is the contrast. This series starts off with, we have the Empire having their big Nazi meeting where they discuss how they're going to work together as, this very competent team to cause a genocide on Gorman, and you've got the rebellion on Yavin before there's even a base there, doing their playing rock paper scissors and being eaten by monsters and not working together. And then the end of this series, you have the Empire basically falling apart, eating itself, being like, well, you didn't tell me that, well, you've been hoarding this information, well, you let this person get this, well, you all this bickering, infighting, you fucked up this, it all rolling up the chain, Partagaz killing himself, all of that dysfunction. And then you've got Yavin 4, where the rebellion is starting to get together and is about to, in Rogue One, finally pull together to win a big military victory against the Empire, and then into New Hope, and boom goes the Death Star. We have the inversion of, it's like, again, not to bring it back to the writing of everyone's favourite boy, Nemec, but the Empire, this sort of authoritarian power is brittle. It breaks. It can't hold. I don't know, it's what Leia says, the more you tighten your grip, the more systems slip through your fingers. The Empire is unsustainable, and we see that in the way this series progresses, and when it gets to this point, we see the Empire falling apart and the rebellion starting to coalesce.
By the end, the ISB is left in the questionable hands of I've forgotten his name.
Yeah. Whatever that guy is.
Yeah, the person who's usually being picked on the meetings for doing a mediocre job, but that's, I don't know, that's what you need to do.
The guy that can't shut down the broadcast.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
I like his reaction to Partagaz killing himself as well. He knew it was coming.
It's so well done.
I know I made a comment about Ben Mendelsohn's acting, but the bizarre decision he made as an actor to put his finger on top of Denizkov's head in that scene, which I think was completely improvised. Yeah. It's such a striking image. It's so unsettling and strange, with the gloves.
Before I saw the episode, I saw a picture of that online, and because I didn't want to, because I could tell it was a image from an episode I hadn't seen yet, scrolled quickly past. So the black of his glove just gave the impression of him holding a gun to the back of her head. So I was like, if that's a shot in the next episode, that's quite something.
I mean, it might as well have been.
Yeah,
she ends up in Narkina 2.
Yeah, I mean that is, you couldn't write a better ending for that character. I mean, I'd always thought the joke was she was just going to get promoted onto the Death Star, and then that, a bit like the Jimmy Smits going to Alderaan in Rogue One line. But no, I think the irony of her being kind of crushed by the system that she's kind of worked to build up and maintain. Need to cut Krennic some slack. He's under a very stressful work situation.
Oh,
yeah, that Galen Erso keeps insisting that he needs deep vein whatsificated calcite, and apparently it just won't work without it.
The scene with him and Partagaz, where he calls Partagaz Leo, and you just have that moment of oh, these guys are kind of friends.
Yeah,
they're also talking about
they've
how
got
probably the closest that Krennic has to a friend and someone he can just talk to.
Yeah, and I think as well what makes the scene initially so interesting is it's one of the first main times, at least, where we see Partagaz as not the dominant force in that room. I think in season 1 there's a bit where Yularen is there and he's above Partagaz, but he's not really wielding power over him as much.
I think that's part of the appeal of Andor as well, is that it is so well cast, and even like the most minor parts, that they get a proper actor in. Um,
Yeah.
like you think about the quality of characters, you've got Cousin Richie who's in like 2 episodes. You got some really fantastic
Yeah.
actors.
It's
in,
not
in very small parts.
It's not just the casting of like really really good actors. It's also casting actors that I used to think weren't that great until I saw them in this show. And I mean, the main character is certainly that. Like, I rewatched Rogue One recently, so I'm a little bit now kind of biased because I've watched Andor, but the only real memory that I had of Rogue One, because now it is like a 9-10-year-old film and I only ever watched it the one time, was that Felicity Jones and Diego Luna both weren't like they didn't act very well in the film, and I'd never seen Diego Luna in anything else. So for about 10 years, actually I saw him in Narcos as well, and I also wasn't a big fan of his performance in that show as well. And I'm so glad that they made this show so that I could actually see him for 2 seasons play a really well written character and really shine and come through and like really play a character that acts like he really gives a shit and cares about what's going on. Because I mean, I could have gone for another 10-15 years thinking that he wasn't a very good actor, and all I'll really know him is as the guy that loves Yabba. Like that's what I've known about him for the last 10 years. Yeah,
he needs to discover that texture.
He does.
It's really Rogue One is the Better Call Saul thing. Like, it's so heightened by watching.
Absolutely.
Andor.
Yeah.
I mean, partially it's a little bit frustrating that the series doesn't have this really kind of epic final episode. That Rogue One does have more flaws than Andor does. But I really love the final shot of him kind of like walking towards his destiny. And kind of weirdly got quite emotional, like when he kind of locks eyes with that Force healer.
Yeah.
After they've had that kind of scene of like he's kind of walking to his doom. And obviously the final kind of beat of the kind of the reveal of Bix, with the kind of child that he'll never know.
Yeah. It's thinking of the Force healer briefly. How it's so interesting seeing her for the first time. And just like, oh yeah, the Force exists in this world. But there's still like this feeling of like, is she just like a scammer? And then it feels like, okay, no, maybe she is actually, has some connection with the Force. Because I think in another thing as well, I hate that kind of feeling of like, ooh, this character's going to do something meaningful. But with the weight of Rogue One, you sort of have that, oh, yeah, no, I feel that.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I like that Andor mostly stayed away from the Force and doesn't acknowledge it, and I am eternally grateful that there are, no lightsabers in this series, because, much as I love lightsabers, they have their time and their place, and they don't need to be in every Star Wars thing.
Andrew, I completely agree with you. I think it's one of the best things about Andor. I know that we've discussed this before already. I was watching a YouTube video recently, and one of the comments on it was an Andor related video, and one of the comments was like, oh my god, this is the closest thing to the original Star Wars trilogy that I've seen in years. And I was just thinking that's ridiculous. This is like the furthest thing that I've seen from the original trilogy, and in some ways that's kind of what makes it so good. There aren't many alien characters, it's pretty much all humans. You're right, there's not really anything to do with the Force or the Jedi or lightsabers or any of the really like mystical, fantastical thing from the original trilogy or the other Star Wars films. It's a super grounded, like realistic show that's about exploring different systems and what it means to live under like the oppressive nature of the Empire. And then obviously it's a sci-fi show, right? So you've still got starships and stuff like that, but generally the tone of the show, with it being a bit more darker and, as I've said, more mature and more grown up, I don't really see a place for a character like Darth Vader to just crop up in a scene. It just wouldn't feel right. Like tonally it would feel like a mismatch. You know what I mean?
There's the great line Tony Gilroy said when he was asked about if Vader was going to show up, and he's like, "No, I've written for him before, and he doesn't have that much to say."
Yeah.
That he'd rather have like a human being, like someone like a Partagaz, than a Darth Vader, because it's a show about the shades of grey, right? Like Luthen, who we haven't talked about as much, is probably maybe a bigger character in season 1 than season 2, but is the ultimate shades of grey character of doing the right things, the wrong things for the right reasons, I should say.
And we're also working our way slowly up the chain of command. We see, we see like Deidre at the ISB when she's a relatively low-ranking functionary, and then we go to Partagaz above her, and then we go to Krennic, who is above him, and then we move into Rogue One, and you see Tarkin above.
The Morlana, like whatever the company is,
Morlana 1.
Yeah. We see that company.
We see them Cyril first before we ever see stormtroopers. You're right.
We see the people on the ground.
We
on
work
planet.
from the ground up until eventually we hit the point where suddenly Darth Vader, the Emperor, and Luke Skywalker, they are there at the top level of Star Warsness. But I was going to say, regarding the Force being a thing in Andor, I think while it is mostly absent from... It's not... The thing is, I don't think it is absent from Andor. I think it's just handled in a very interesting way. Like, there are moments where...
Are you saying that you don't think it's absent because within the universe the Force just kind of exists?
Partly that, but also there are moments when Cassian seems to acknowledge that, where he's like, I don't know why I have survived so far. I have been pushing my luck and I have got through things. And that, I think you can view that as, that could just be what happened. Or you can view that as the hand of the Force is on him and it's nudging him towards his destiny, and that's what the Force healer says when she does her little reading of him, is like, this guy has a destiny. I believe in the Force, so I think it's the Force. The Force is pointing you in a direction and you have a job to do. And that can be true, but that doesn't need to be true for... Cassian is not motivated by that. That is a thing that scares him, and he has very interesting perspective on that. Luke Skywalker is told he has an amazing destiny, and he's like, sign me the fuck up, give me a laser sword, I'm going to have a great time. And Cassian is like, I don't want a destiny, I would just quite like to be able to... Yeah, I would quite like to settle down with my girlfriend, actually, and just live a peaceful life.
Yeah. I'm gonna do the right thing and do right by her, and then have her be like, I can't let you sacrifice that for me.
Yeah, so the Force is present in Andor, but in such a brilliantly unobtrusive and like subtle and interesting way that it doesn't detract from the show feeling like it is just stuff happening. Because the Force can easily make things feel contrived by being like, well, if you have this thing in this universe that can just make stuff happen because it wants it to, then I don't know, why does anyone choose to do anything in this? But Andor still has interesting choices to make, despite having this, destiny.
Yeah, I guess it lends a tragic weight to a lot of the characters who, by being in prequels, we know ultimately are going to meet their kind of untimely demise. Which is why I guess it's not strange, but the kind of hopeful note it ends on when it cuts to all the characters, or the kind of the women that live on. You've got Mon Mothma. That great shot of her kind of like in kind of almost like guerrilla gear, like surrounded by the rebel soldiers. Claire kind of seeing Yavin and what Luthen kind of died to create. The kind of sunrise on Yavin.
Vel.
I guess we don't really know. We don't really know what happens to Vel if she, if she like blows up in an X-wing like in 2 years' time on Hoth or whatever. But seeing these characters, and then obviously we've already talked about it, but the final shot of Bix, like the people that do live on.
I was expecting far more people to be dead by the end of this series.
I wanted to ask you guys what you actually thought about the way that it handled Clea and Vel, in the sense that they're not in Rogue One, but they don't have like a very terminal conclusion in Andor. They just, as Harry said,
I like it. They're the Kim Wexlers of the show.
Yeah,
I was so relieved that Clea made it through alive. Like in those last 3 episodes, I was like, she is the only person I care about anymore. Like, I don't want her to die. She's too good. And she is... I do think it is a brilliant move making her the focal point of those 3 episodes, because we know Melchi's going to be fine. We know K2SO... we say fine. We know they're making it to Rogue One. We know Cassian and Melchi and K2SO are making it to Rogue One. We do not know what happens to Claire, and bad stuff could easily happen to her. And no, the fact that she ends alive and surrounded by people who are on her side is really nice, and I would love to see more of what Clea does going onwards, and I'd love to see more of what Velgo does going onwards too.
Although my fear with that is that you'd have these great characters in different writers' hands that I almost wish they don't get touched, and we just end on these endings.
My slightly safer thing for what the spiritual sequel to Andor could be is a series focusing on Mon Mothma after the fall of the Empire, dealing with the rebuilding of the construction of the New Republic and all the problems therein of trying to piece together like the bits of imperial bureaucracy that are left, and the difficulties, the political realities of like, well, we're not strictly at war anymore. How do we get everyone on side? I don't know. Maybe that'd be very boring, but I want more politics in my Star Wars.
There's some great kind of politics in this show. So something along those lines I think would be strong. Just to quickly, before we wrap up, mention something that we've not talked about. It's pivotal, I think, to the final arc, but also would have broken the show if it had come in earlier. It's K2SO, who I think is one of the characters that steals Rogue One. He's a really kind of entertaining, funny character. And I think I'd forgotten quite how funny he is. I really enjoy his stuff in this, but also how OP he is as well. That he essentially they can kind of write themselves out of any corner because of how kind of powerful he is. That it makes sense why they introduce him this late.
It's the limit as well of he only makes, well, you can't bring him on an undercover mission unless it is undercover in an Imperial base where those sorts of droids might be walking around.
Yes.
And he can't just be out walking around with Melshi and Cassian unless they are disguised as Imperials, because otherwise it stands out. So it's something Tony Gilroy said, but you are incredibly limited. If you have Andor and K2SO, there's only like 2 stories you can tell, and it's going to be them infiltrating an Imperial base and Cassian in Imperial disguise, and you can only do that like once, and then it's going to be boring if you do it again, which is why he gets added in so late and then only goes on one mission, because otherwise he just has to stay behind on the ship, like, leaving your dog in the car with the window slightly ajar as you go shopping.
To his favourite tune.
He's got a little bottle of water. He's fine.
The line he has about like he was at the parade, the Emperor was there, but like the slight implication that he has all his old memories, so he remembers like taking part in the Gorman massacre, and that he could just square that circle of like doing all these horrific things and be like, yep, I'm a changed man.
I do wonder, has Wilman and Wilman's girlfriend ever had really difficult conversations with K2SO about his culpability for like war crimes committed on Gorman?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen, because
we've not talked about Wilman really.
No, we haven't talked about him huffing the gas.
He's a good character.
That much to say, really. It's not like he's one of the centerpieces of this show. I feel like there are other more interesting characters that we have spent time talking about.
He's got a type, and I really enjoy his plotline with Saw Gerrera that ends with Saw Gerrera's monologue about the kind of Rydinium.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about Saw Gerrera, but I'm aware we are pressed for time, and
there's so much. There's so much.
I want to say 2 things, and then I'm done. First of all, is the guy that recast Bail Organa a better actor than Jimmy Smith?
Yes, hands down, absolutely.
I think I prefer
him in this series to Jimmy Smits in Rogue One.
Yeah. But I think it's a mixture of he is used so well in this, whereas in Rogue One he just feels like he is standing awkwardly in the corner.
Jimmy Smits just looks kind of old and tired, and like he doesn't really want to be there in Rogue One. And I don't know if it reflects how he is.
The scene where he shows up is really funny.
It's like steps out from the shadows, and it means nothing to the scene.
Yeah,
and then later,
the Star Wars music playing, like the sting as he steps out the shadows.
Just later, I think is it Bond turning to him and being like, "What about your Jedi friend?"
Yeah,
it's like, I have called on him. I trust her with my life, the person I have sent out.
Yeah.
Anyway, I must go. My people need me.
I have to go back to my planet and remind them that they have no weapons and cannot defend themselves.
The other thing slightly feels like we're running out of time here. In terms of the show, like it's a bit of a rush plotline, but it is awesome. Is the Dr. Gorst scene where he returns to his safe house with a
Yeah.
cupcake to get
Are
ambushed.
you
by
having
Vix.
traumatic nightmares? Have you considered trying murder?
Yeah.
I mean that kind of like Bix kind of trauma arc, where she's getting addicted to drugs. That scene where kind of Luthen visits her, it is quite hard stuff. So seeing a guy get horrifically tortured to death is a kind of trauma therapy.
Yeah,
Oddly quite
yeah.
satisfying, even if it's pretty taken the
Yeah.
wrong
I
lesson
mean,
out of it.
I feel like it. I mean,
Good
who
stuff.
knows what Bix goes through in the year we don't see after that episode ends, but it does feel like it all gets wrapped up a little bit too neatly, too quickly. It's just like, oh, she was having nightmares and was addicted to drugs, and she's killed the person who tortured her, and she's fine now, basically, going forwards. I don't know. And, yeah, I'm probably being uncharitable in my reading of that, because I feel like there is... Certainly the show isn't so unsubtle about it, but... Yeah.
I think the shame is that she's just not given all that much to do for the last half of the season. She feels more like she acts in ways to make Cassian's character more interesting. Is possibly where I'd start building some criticisms for her. Or not her, but for...
I mean,
Andor is this,
she
this
does
series.
still have some quite... She has a very interesting conversation with Vel, which I really liked.
Yeah, I guess my fear was just that she was gonna like die as like a
Yeah.
motivating factor for Cassian.
I
so,
am very surprised
Whereas
she was
instead,
alive.
she lives as a motivating factor for Cassian.
yeah, the fact is, it's like it's still kind of like using like the woman as like a motivating prop and not a full character, but it's slightly less misogynistic and that she's not fridged. I was kind of, I guess I was relieved, but yeah, I mean there are some criticisms of how characters can be handled, but I think part of that comes from they just didn't have the time. Like it was they had 3 episodes to do each year, which I think is a really fun narrative trick, but it gives it such a kind of propulsive forward momentum that there isn't time to kind of
Perhaps we'll
get
get a
everything
spin-off
perfect.
series called Bix, dealing with her, the travails of being a single mother in the New Republic.
First of all, I am so happy with pretty much every way they dealt with the kind of end of all these characters. I think they could have easily killed off like all of them. The fact that there are a couple like Claire and Vel that kind of just live on and that they don't die, but then they're not in Rogue One. I don't have an issue with that. I also think the way they had... You guys already talked about it, but I don't think I got to say that... they could have very easily and lazily found a way to kill off Dedra, but actually what happens to her is somehow more tragic, like being stuck in a cell indefinitely, that she's kind of only there because of the success that she's helped contribute, I think is a really ironic way to end that character's story, so I quite liked that. I also just wanted to say, I think one of my favourite things about Andor is the fact that it's the only thing that I've ever watched in the Star Wars universe where you actually feel what it's like to live under, like, the reign of the Empire, in the sense that in the first season you have the prison arc and how much that's close to the kind of things that you see happen in real life, and then we've talked about the Gorman genocide, and historically with Star Wars content, the Empire is just this kind of evil thing that sort of lurks in the background that does evil things, but in this show you get to see like almost like a day in the life of what it's like to work for the Empire. And also the thing, I think, Johnny, you mentioned the fact that there's just a thing where one of the characters, I can't remember if it's Heert or Young, but one of them just goes on annual leave for a day, and that not being a thing that would like ever happen in another Star Wars thing. All these things like this, again, the fact that there's no lightsabers, not really the Force, no Jedi, the fact that there aren't really any kind of non-humanoid characters, all of that just adds to how grounded and realistic and like well
the
told
attack
this story
team
is.
for the ISB having radios and feeling like they have this whole like thought out way of how they would approach these sorts of systems as part of their protocol. It's things like that that just make it feel so real, hold so much weight,
Absolutely.
just lands so much better.
Yeah. Yeah, and then just one last quick thing as well. I think Harry, you mentioned how you're kind of glad that there were those flashbacks in the Luthen and Claire episode, but that they didn't have to be there. There was one flashback that made me really happy that they were there, and it's the one where it's him and Claire at a table, and you don't really know the context for what's going on at first, and then it kind of becomes slowly more apparent. I think that scene is like one of my favourite scenes in the entire show, and I think Stellan Skarsgård acting is so good in that show. Like he really gets across to Claire in that scene, like what they're about to start, what they're in for, and the kind of mentality that she's going to have if she really wants to stick through this. I just think the way he acts in that scene just kind of goes to show how much of a brilliant actor he is.
Yeah. I think my closing thoughts are, I do genuinely think that Andor Series 1 and Series 2 is like some of the great anti-fascist art of our I don't know, our era, I guess. And also is probably the best Star Wars, the best Star Wars stuff we are ever likely to get. Although I do still, for the sake of contrarianism, will say that Attack of the Clones is actually the best Star Wars. Maybe I'll just start saying it's the best Star Wars film, because I think honestly Andor is the high watermark of Star Wars.
Johnny, can you top that as a way to end the podcast?
Not really, I don't think. It is such a great show. I feel it is a shame that we can only spend this amount of time on it, because there is so much in each episode that you can go into, explore what the characters are thinking, how they're acting, how they're feeling, how it's shadowing things that have happened before, how it shadows things that will happen later.
Honestly, I think we could sustain like a good 20 to 30 minutes on just what is going through Cyril's mind as he is talking to Deidre as they're having their argument.
Yeah.
Like
the fact you can have a full debate on what actually is he thinking. Is he properly leaving the Empire in that moment, or is he just... Is he
petulant? What does he have a plan? Yeah. Is he remembering how badly things went on Ferrix as he is standing in the middle of that crowd being gunned down, thinking, how have I got myself into this position a second time? You know.
Yeah. But anyway, my point is almost not to explore those moments in this as we wrap up, but just to say that there's it's so rich, this show, and that is it's a shame we've only had so long to talk about it.
Look, it leaves you wanting more, like this podcast, but you know, the great art is made out of constraints. I think that the fact that they had 12 episodes to wrap up the story is like us having, you know, an hour and a half to wrap up this podcast.
I was very surprised that they gave us 650 million to do this episode.
Yeah, quite the budget we got for doing this.
All right, well, join us in a year's time where we imply a bunch of things that happened in between podcasts.
300 men? Boys, really? Just men. No droids.
Hello and welcome to my unauthorised transmission of my opinions of Andor Season 2. I haven't listened back to what the others have said, so I'm just going to go ahead and assume that they're not saying anything because they are in agreement with all of my points. So without much further ado, Andor Season 2 is overall a very strong follow-up to Andor Season 1, which is arguably one of the best pieces of Star Wars film/TV media produced. Except for, I would say, its start is a very... You know, it takes a while for it to hit the ground running in the way that Andor Season 1 was this kind of frenetic, like, consistent, which gave Season 1 a very tight, intense pacing that was really good, and obviously lends to some very cool, like, short sequences of distinct, like, missions. You know, there's a heist, there's a prison break, there's a revolution on Ferrix, there's the first one that I've forgotten, which is really a lot to live up to for Andor season 2. And I feel like at the start unfortunately it has its worst two like subplots going on at around the same time. It has this like battle where Andor gets stranded with a stolen ship on some jungle with just the most useless goons of all time that are just arguing over nothing for what feels like 2,000 episodes. Where they're just like, he gets captured, they're like, who do we get to pilot the ship? Hive, they're all just so incompetent and useless. It's so frustrating to watch, which is very funny because I feel like Andor season 1 did a really good job of introducing, like, with each new act of episodes, it could be like, this is the cast for this episode, you know, with a couple of the recurring, they're so cool. Here's, you know, Melshi from the Prison Break, who is a legend and comes back in Andor season 2 and Rogue One. God rest his soul. So the goons on the jungle planet, oh my god, I hate that. They're so useless, but it kind of is almost worth it for the moment when set up this like entire protracted like conflict between like they break down into two factions. They're like at each other's throat. They're trying to do these ridiculous schemes. And Andor just like sneaks away and abandons them, which is so like you see like this last shot if they're like, wait, no, don't leave us, don't, and it just like you get this sense of like the way the camera cuts away from them is just like such like a biting like you're irrelevant comment that is made on them like silently just by that. The way it's framed, the way it's shot, it's so funny. It almost makes me think it's worth it, but it's not. It's not. It's still not good. And also the Chandrilan wedding scene is interspersed around the same early segment of episodes. It has some cool moments with, you know, Tay, the friend of Mon Mothma. Maybe I'm evil now, but it's just so long. It's just so like they cut back to the same like dance sequence that looks like it's shot in Tel Aviv way too many times, and that is a bit unfortunate that it kind of has that rough start. I don't mind like the stuff on the farm planet, and I think early like after that it gets into a really cool heist of like a listening device that is stuck on a artwork piece that is the result of basically Luthen and Cleia getting in over their heads, which is, you know, it definitely picks up from after it's about, you know, takes, you know, after it's got his wheels spinning, which is good. I think that, yeah, once it gets into the Gorman sort of arc, where it's talking about the revolution on this planet that has some kind of ore that the Empire need so bad for making the Death Star. Hush, hush, don't tell anyone. You kind of get this sense of like, really, you get to know Gorman, and I think it helps that it is over much more of like a protracted time period, that when it finally does come to a head of like episode 7 or 8, like that it's just like this powder keg of revolution finally being lit, it has such an incredible weight to it, especially since it's also the sort of conclusion of the Cyril Khan plotline, and kind of proves his, you know, worthiness to an extent. And he just goes on an upward trajectory of competency. At Dedra Mira's side, he's like her inside man for the Gorman Revolution, which is another group of not useful rebels, by the way. Like, I feel like, you know, as an aside, if peel off Andor season 1, you get to see people who are like really good at what they do, and obviously it is, you know, realistic that sometimes you encounter the inept, the useless amongst the rebellion, but you know, I feel like that also is a bit of a double-edged sword of like, oh, come on, pull it together, lads, lock in. So yeah, the conclusion of Cyril Khan's story of him being like this, he's like constantly using whatever means at his disposal to hunt down Cassian, and you know, you get this sense of his like building like obsession, hatred. And you get to see how he like there's an amazing like scene where, you know, earlier on he's like dating Dedra and his, you get to see him and his mum, and you get to see him in one of the most uncomfortable but funny family dinner scenes of all time. You get to see him like kind of build up like a backbone for himself, which results in an ultimate like confrontation with him and Dedra Meero, him being like, what is going on, him willing to just like fully make her talk about the secrets of the Death Star. But then he sees Cassian, the object of his hatred, in the crowds of that revolutionary scene, and it's just an amazing all-out man mode brawl of just these two guys. Cassian hasn't even met him, but there's so much just like this action is just like speaking without words, truly, of like how you communicate Cyril's hatred and devotion coming through despite his crisis of faith. You get to see him save Dedra despite how he left her, didn't trust her at that point, which is very interesting and romantic in its own way. I feel like a lot of Andor season 2 kind of is about how romance fits into the rebellion, which is kind of an interesting choice. I feel like Andor season 1 I wouldn't say it was like a completely like devoid of love world, but Andor season 2 has definitely chosen to take a bit of more of a focus on that, and I feel like it's a nice bridge between Andor and like original trilogy, which is basically like a love triangle melodrama. You get some interesting character developments between Bix and Cass. You get to see how her trauma of being hit with the sound that makes you go crazy. You also get to see how sometimes it doesn't work out. After Gormand, you then get the sequence with Mon Mothma giving her kind of retributive speech in the Senate, which is again just like a classic Andor style planning, execution, tension, misdirection, all coming together in a wonderful orchestra of spy, espionage, violence, which is really cool. I think one of my favourite parts is earlier on, you get this wonderful speech with Wilman, Cassian's friend from Ferrix. He's working for Saw, and Saw gives this amazing, like, intense, crazy speech about this, like, flammable, explosive, like, gas that they're trying to extract from some pipe through this very, like, sensitive lock-picking process. And it's just, like, the tension of, like, are they going to all blow up? And also, what is Saw talking about with this crazy, like, talking about boys in the jungle? But also it does really encapsulate how Saw's, like, where his fanaticism comes from. It's very, very intense, and you feel a lot of, I don't know what you would call it, but there's an intense feeling there. Andor season 2, it closes out with the scheme of both escaping with knowledge of the Death Star, and also when Luthen unfortunately does get caught, Claire has to go on another stealth mission, and it pulls it off really well. And also, of course, the rising mystery about what the Death Star is. You get the introduction of K2SO, which is maybe one of the best droids in Star Wars, and that's a high bar. There's some top tier robots in this franchise, and K2 is such a joy on screen. I mean, I wish he had been in it for more, but you kind of understand why he couldn't. He's just too much of a monster. he has to be reined in by being in just the sort of last little segment of the show. So, with that all said, Andor season 2, a very solid showing. Maybe not as good as Andor season 1, if only for its lack of consistency, but equally it does have the weight of Revolution, the sort of intensity behind it, and how people cope with it. So with that all said, I'll end this rebellion transmission.
300 men? Boys, really. Just men. No droids,